Hello, everyone. This is the Static Site Editor Product and Design Weekly Call for September 14th, 2020. I don't have much on the agenda that wasn't covered in this morning's meeting, so I'm just going to turn it over to design, and we can chat on your first topic, Michael.
All right. So the first topic is the category maturity scorecard. The Static Site Editor group underwent our first maturity scorecard testing round to get us from minimal to viable. Today's session was our 10th participant out of the groups of part of marketing and sales. So those are the personas we wanted to target. And we're still like going through the details of the notes, but like from a high level perspective, the scores are high enough to move to update the scorecard rating. So yeah, thank you for all the people involved in taking time to talk to Eric and I through that. And yeah, I think this is good for our group overall.
Yeah, and to be clear, I only did one today. It was mostly you. So thank you for Catherine for pushing this through and doing the hard work here. I had a script to go off of and everything. I didn't hardly have any hand in this. But it was a great conversation, and it was really valuable. I'm glad I got to do one of them.
Yeah. So I guess the next step there is updating that rating in the handbook itself. The other solution validation thing that we had on the docket was editing front matter. So that one was, I kind of wrapped it up with 4 participants because I felt like it was enough for us to move forward with some of the designs that we have. And there's probably more in-depth scenarios that we can go into once we dive deeper into front matter. So in the handbook, front matter is usually responsible for handling title and description and page layouts. It's in marketing that it's a little bit more in depth with social media, multiple authors, and the more elaborate use cases. So I think we have enough now to move forward with the handbook. So I think we can go forward with that. And if we need further testing specifically to marketing use cases, then we can schedule further solution validations in that kind of space. The unique part of the editing front matter testing this time was a part of it was done as unmoderated testing. So that means that users would get like a script and they would like record their answers to it and upload the video back to us. I think in theory, it's a really good way to get some quick feedback asynchronously from people, especially we're a global remote company. The platform we used was a little bit tricky to use. So I think that's something that I fed back to the UX research team, and then I'm going to iterate and use that information to make a good choice in the future for tools to use. So overall, that's a positive aspect for us. From the design side, what I'm taking a look at right now is updating the publishing flow, thinking about that whole lag in the submit changes where there's a bit of a way to create the branches and the MRs and stuff like that, and looking at the flows also from like associating new changes to an existing MR, which is a very common workflow. So I'm taking a look at all those kind of holistically because they all seem very interrelated. But I'm also knowing that I need to get some designs ready for like title and description editing. And based on the comments that I've seen so far in this morning, I feel like I'm on the right direction for that. So that's good. So yeah, I'm just going to crack on with that. Probably create an issue by the end of the week for solution validation with publishing changes again. But I feel like this time it might be a longer, like 1 hour session because it feels like more in depth. So far, we've been doing 30-minute sessions and we get by. In terms of like testing internally, like when it reaches an hour, do we compensate people or do we try to keep it to 30 minutes, or I'm not really sure what the protocol there. We can talk offline if needed, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have a specific protocol. Usually we just have our sessions uncompensated. So I guess you could pose the question to the participants, like, are you comfortable with an hour? And if they're not, then maybe what would they be comfortable with?
Yeah.
Usually, usually we don't compensate normal people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, or maybe that's expected. I don't know, but yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's good to know. And I'll continue on with some of the designs today and tomorrow, and see where I get into the state of the script and everything, and see if it really needs an hour, or should we just break it up to 2 solution validations, or because that's what happened last time, where I think I bit off too much and tried to jam so many things in, like editing front matter and publishing workflows. So yeah, cool. I'll update everyone by the end of the week. And I'll hand the talking points over to you, Catherine.
Sure. Yeah. So I have created an MR for a first iteration of the internal content editor persona. This so far has been based off of prior research, and I know that the category maturity scorecard just came in, so there might be another iteration that we can make based off of what we learned from there, or it might be similar. So feel free to take a look and share any feedback you have, and if you remember anything from those studies that you think you were seeing as a trend across participants, you can submit a change to add it as well. But this is like a first iteration for it so that we could get it on there in the handbook.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. This is great. I was just browsing through it. Really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so this one is just a recap from, I think it was it's crazy, I think it was 3 weeks ago already. But a recap from then, we decided to start with the internal one, and then as we kind of get a little bit more, maybe some insight into the direction we want to go, whether we want to start with an content editing persona externally or configuring the site, that sort of thing, then we could do the rounds of interviews for the external persona. So this is kind of like the first step of putting together that person that we're building for.
Thank you for that. I like the name Connie too.
You're welcome. It gets harder and harder each time. This one was actually pretty simple, but so we try to keep them gender neutral, and some of them were really tricky. But this one, I'm like, okay, we could have Connor, Constance, Connie. How about that? Let's just say it's gender neutral. I think it is, but I've been wrong before. I've had people correct me and be like, nope. But I'm like, I swear it's neutral. I know at least one person who has this name. They're like, nope. So, yeah, that's what goes on behind the scenes. Yeah, awesome. That is.
Well, I'll give some feedback, and I'll share with the rest of the engineers as well, so they can see the work in progress. This is great.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so I'll leave it open for you to give feedback, and then I will submit it. I'll probably, I don't know, I think maybe William owns the page, one of them, but yeah, just feel free to add any feedback or suggest a point to add there.
Great. Well, I don't really have much. I'll just recap a couple points that I made earlier. Just not that you can't watch the recording, but I do want to celebrate our group's iteration, because it was called out internally, and I feel like everybody should get the credit they deserve for that. I had the shorter story is I had been working on release post items, and I was drafting one for our configuration file, which Chad has been working on architecting. He has an iterative set of MRs, and the first few iterations are just building out the foundation of the configuration file and, you know, using values, and his approach is to use first a value that actually doesn't get surfaced anywhere. But it's a very important feature. So, and it's a directional feature. I wrote a release post item, and then in a comment, I said, I'm not really quite sure about this one. I feel a little uncomfortable talking about a feature in a release post. It's meant to be something of a release note that's not actually something anybody can use. And turns out when I'm uncomfortable with something, that means we're doing something right. So I should, because afterwards I got called out by a product group manager and my manager, my product director, for a good example of iteration. And so I thanked Chad this morning. I think it even made it into the handbook as an example of how we should be iterating towards things, even if they're so small that they can't be used yet, or you know, have no visible change. So that's great. That's one of the things we're shipping in 13.4. The other is the front matter editing UI, which is I'm very excited about, and I'm focused on 13.5 planning. The rest of this week, I'll be recording the kickoff call actually tomorrow. So not really the rest of this week, but the first half of this week. The other thing I covered was an interesting use case for linked files and partials that Sid posted in Slack. And there's a thread link in the agenda from the earlier meeting. I recommend you read it. It's interesting. It's not something we're trying to solve immediately, but it is a pain point that he's had with the static site editor, and others have run into this too. The gist of it is there's some pages that are essentially just a Ruby helper partial that links to a data file and gets dynamically created when the static site generator is building the page. And the static site editor itself, or sorry, the static site generator is building the page. The static site editor doesn't provide much value for those types of pages. There's not much you can do there. It might be that case for a long time. It might never be valuable, but we should, you know, keep that thread in mind as we think about the path for linking files, including data files and things like that. And the last is, I guess, maybe an FYI that could have done off the recording, but I'll be the release post manager this week, and this is our busy week, reviewing the post and getting everything assembled. So if I fall off the radar and you're waiting on me, if I'm become a blocker, please let me know, and I will turn my focus to where it should be. So that's it for me.
Sounds good.
Great. Anything else before we wrap up?
I do have one question. So I was, in the same vein of this persona, I was thinking ahead about the screener for the external one. And I was wondering if beyond the tools that are currently on the category direction page as like competitive landscape or something, if there are tools that you would keep in mind when screening for people to talk with. I think there was Netlify. I probably should have had it in front of me so I could just tell. Okay.
So like Netlify, Forestry, Contentful, those are big ones. I would add WordPress in there because it's a little more ubiquitous. I wouldn't necessarily say we would compete directly with WordPress, but the people who would be contributing would be familiar with WordPress most likely.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I was thinking about this the other day, but in a very like off angle side. But with the competitive landscape, I think these are like our static site editor competitors, you know, like companies and products that solve the static site editing. But in the case of solving like the handbook, like I think that's another like list of category, a different list of competitors or like other solutions people would use. So like companies that use Notion or Confluence as their handbook would definitely fall into place. And like, adopting, like our group started off in the handbook, and it's like we're kind of solving that problem as well. And I think that's almost something that we should mention. Like, I think there's that kind of gray area. Like one is like a technical solution, and then the other one is like the problem we're trying to solve with this product or solution, is like making it easy for everyone to contribute content, be it like product, company information, processes. And I think that's a different list of things that we could put in there. So if y'all want, I can put like an MR in to add those lists of companies in to help increase that scope of competitive landscapes.
Yeah, I think especially Confluence would be helpful just for the editing and collaborative, right? Collaborative editing experience, even if we're not directly competing. Again, like WordPress, it's like something these authors and contributors would be familiar with. And I know we have some research, most likely. I think I know we have some research on Confluence related to the wiki and everything as well, authoring experience there. So even if we don't, then it could be valuable in both places.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Excellent question. Thank you. All right. Well, anything else before I hit the stop button? All right.